Most people assume governments exist to protect their citizens. But history contains moments that shatter that assumption completely. This is the story of how the United States government deliberately poisoned tens of thousands of its own citizens and got away with it. Chapter 1. Prohibition and the Problem. In 1920, the United States made alcohol illegal nationwide. The idea was simple. Alcohol was destroying families and fueling crime. Ban it and America would become safer. What actually happened was the opposite. Americans did not stop drinking. They simply started drinking illegally. Bootleggers and organized crime exploded in size and power. Al Capone became powerful precisely because Prohibition handed criminals an enormously profitable industry with no legal competition. At the heart of this illegal economy was industrial alcohol. Alcohol is not just a beverage, it is also a vital industrial chemical used in manufacturing and medicines. The government allowed industrial alcohol to be produced legally for these purposes, but bootleggers discovered they could divert it, redistill it, to remove added chemicals, and sell it as bootleg liquor. By the mid-1920s, an estimated 60 million gallons of industrial alcohol were being diverted annually into the illegal liquor trade. The government decided something had to be done. Chapter 2. The Decision. In 1926, the United States government made a decision that still shocks when you understand what it actually meant. The Treasury Department decided to dramatically expand the poisoning of industrial alcohol. The logic was brutally simple. If bootleggers were stealing industrial alcohol and selling it, then the government would make it so toxic that anyone who drank it would die. The deterrent would be death itself.
We are adding a small amount of chemical. It will effectively discourage drinking.
The government had previously added mild chemicals to industrial alcohol to make it taste bad, but in 1926 the formula was dramatically upgraded. The new mixture included methanol, wood alcohol, in concentrations that government chemists knew with absolute certainty would cause blindness and death. They also added kerosene, gasoline, and chloroform. The key fact that makes this deliberate poisoning is that the government's own scientists explicitly told officials what these concentrations would do to human beings. The officials knew. They debated it, and they went ahead anyway. Chapter 3. The Deaths. The consequences were immediate and catastrophic. In 1926, in New York City alone, 400 people died from poisoned alcohol. Across the country, the toll mounted rapidly. People who drank bootleg liquor went blind. They suffered seizures. Their organs failed. They died in hospitals, on streets, and in their homes. The victims were predominantly working-class Americans. Factory workers, labourers, immigrants, people with little money who bought the cheapest available alcohol. The government's poison program fell hardest on the most vulnerable. By the time Prohibition ended in 1933, estimates of the death toll range from 10,000 to 50,000 people. The range is wide because many deaths were attributed to other causes, and the government had strong incentives to keep the full numbers obscure. New York City's chief medical examiner, Charles Norris, publicly condemned the program. He called it deliberate murder on the part of the government. Toxicologist Alexander Getteler published studies documenting methanol poisoning in victims' bodies. Journalists wrote exposés. Senators introduced legislation to ban the practice. The government defended itself. Officials argued industrial alcohol was clearly labelled as not for drinking. They argued bootleggers were the real killers. They argued that anyone who drank during Prohibition was breaking the law and assumed whatever risks came with that choice. In other words, people who broke the law deserved whatever happened to them, including blindness and death from poisons the government deliberately added. Chapter 4. The Cover-Up. The program was never fully hidden but never fully acknowledged either. Death certificates for victims frequently listed other causes: heart failure, pneumonia, unknown causes. The official narrative consistently blamed bootleggers rather than the government chemist who designed the lethal formula. When Prohibition ended in 1933, the poisoning program ended with it. There was no congressional investigation, no accountability for officials who approved the policy, no compensation for families of victims. The episode was folded into the chaos of the Prohibition era and largely forgotten. Decades later, journalists and historians pieced together the full picture from government documents, toxicology reports, and news accounts. Only then did the true scale become clear. Chapter 5. The Broader Pattern. The Prohibition poisoning was not an isolated incident. It was part of a broader pattern of government experimentation, targeting populations without the power to protect themselves. The Tuskegee syphilis study began in 1932 and ran for 40 years. The government enrolled 399 black men with syphilis and deliberately withheld treatment even after penicillin became available. The men were told they were being treated. They were not. Dozens died from the disease. In 1950, the US Navy secretly sprayed San Francisco with bacteria to test how a biological weapon might spread through a city. Residents were not informed. Several became seriously ill. In the 1950s and 60s, the CIA ran a program called MKUltra, secretly dosing American and Canadian citizens with LSD without their knowledge as part of mind control experiments. Some suffered permanent psychological damage. At least one person died. The pattern is consistent across all these programs. Government agencies decided certain goals justified using human beings as unknowing subjects, and the populations targeted were always those with the least power to resist or seek accountability. Chapter 6. The Lesson. The Prohibition poisoning program killed tens of thousands of Americans. It was known at the time. It was debated at the time. It was condemned at the time. And it continued anyway. That is perhaps the most disturbing element. This was not a secret program hidden from everyone. It was a policy debated openly within government, criticized publicly by doctors and journalists, and defended by officials who believed the calculation was justified. People in positions of power made a deliberate decision that the lives of poor Americans who broke a law by drinking were acceptable losses in service of a policy goal. The officials who approved the poisoning program were not monsters from another world. They were bureaucrats and politicians making cost-benefit calculations. They decided the costs would be paid by people who had no voice in the decision. That is not a warning about a distant past. It is a warning about what institutions are capable of when accountability disappears and certain populations are deemed acceptable collateral damage. 50,000 people died drinking a poison their own government put there. Their names are in no memorial. There is no monument to what was done to them. There is only the record. And the question of whether anyone is paying attention to it